I would like to think that I played a meaningful role in transforming a brand and experience into best in class. And we tend to think not just within our industry, the restaurant industry, but we look at some sort of independent metrics that talk about experiences that you might have. So compare us to Apple, compare us to Amazon, compare us to Google, whoever. Can we you don't think of fast food as being the place you're going to get an experience like that. So can we, it's counterintuitive, but can we deliver against that? So I'd like to think that in terms of business impact, I'm able to help it in that way, but I also I want people to look back, kind of like you might look back and think about that one teacher that you had, that they might have been tough on you, but you look back or coach and think, wow, they really had a transformational impact on my life, not just around the subject matter, not just around that sport, but just the way I think about my life. I want to be remembered as that type of leader, someone that cared and poured themselves into the people that I worked with, and people see themselves as a better version of themselves as a result of the chance that we had to work together. I even talk sometimes about what's your genius? Can you clarify your genius? And the way I would describe that, if you think about the things you're just naturally gifted at, and I put that on one dimension, and then think, what do you have passion about? What gets, you can't help yourself, you just get fired up about it. Put that on a different dimension or axis, and where those two axes intersect, draw a circle around that, say that's your genius, where your strengths and passions come together. And focus as much time and energy as you can on that. And stuff that's outside of that circle, see if there's a way to hand it off, sub it out, probably to somebody, hopefully to somebody it's in their genius. And I just want to spend as much time focusing on what I think I'm really good at, because I'm less apt to burn out. I'm more likely to do something that's meaningful, that adds value, if I can stay within that. And I try to do that across the board, at work, at home, but you have to get really clear on what are those things for you, what are your strengths, what are your passions. An integrated life means I'm the same person, hopefully, in my work as I am at home and in my endeavors outside of work. And if I've really done a good job of clarifying who I am, what my values are, even what I think I can bring to the table to create value, and I show up that way at work, and I show up that way at home, and I show up in community work that I do, in social work with friends, it feels real. I don't have to compartmentalize, and I think that's actually liberating. But it requires that you sit down. Like every day, one of the things I kind of do in that early morning ritual is just kind of walk through who I say I want to be, who I say I want what I want my values to be, and just assess, am I living that out? Am I true to that? Social experiments, this is me intentionally pushing myself outside my comfort zone. I've talked about how you want to evolve, and I think there are lots of ways we can learn. We can read a book, we can listen to a podcast. I've got a whole folders of just YouTube videos that I love watching, because there's so much fascinating stuff out there. But I have learned, if you really, really want to grow, immerse yourself in something. And so I try to find things I'm not particularly good at, I don't know a lot about, and I force myself to learn. That's what I call a social experiment. And in some cases, they pay off in a wonderful way, and I feel like I learn a lot, I grow a lot, I benefit in some way. In other cases, they're colossal failures, and I give myself permission to just bag it and walk away and not worry about it. You don't have to stick with it. But I try. It's a way to give yourself permission to try things that you would not otherwise try, and I think that's really, really healthy. Carol Dweck is, I believe, a Columbia psychologist who wrote the book Mindset. Talks about having a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. Folks with a fixed mindset, they don't want to try much because they don't want to risk failure, because they're trying to protect a particular image of themselves. If you really want to lean in innovation, you have to be really comfortable with failure and just say it's just part of the process. And you don't want to fail too big and have the stakes too high, but you get comfortable with it. And if you don't mind it, you're going to learn from it, and you're going to be a better version of yourself once you've processed it and moved on. Hard skills versus soft skills. You've got to have, I think, all of that in a business or on a team. You need people that are really good at ops or logistics or finance, talent, legal, all of that. Engineers, we need all of that. That's going to be fundamental to building some of the solutions or pursuing some of the opportunities we're after. But I think the soft skills are, I use the expression of a force multiplier. I think a lot about emotional intelligence. I think for leaders, emotional intelligence is one of the driving predictors of how strong a leader they're going to be. And that's the ability to kind of get outside yourself. You almost kind of, you have this awareness of what it's like to be on the other side of you. You have real empathy for the people you work with, the people that you're ultimately trying to serve. You genuinely care about them, and that drives the way you bring a lot of those hard skills and solutions into being. Mm-hmm. If you can mix those in and you get a good balance, again, I think those soft skills become a force multiplier and lead to so much more impact. We have a pretty unique model, particularly for our industry and for franchising, and it started with our founder, Truett Cathy, back in the day. He was looking for talent before he really started looking for capital. He was trying to replicate himself, and he was at the time comfortable growing at a slower rate to get the right people and have more control. And obviously we've picked up lots and lots of momentum, but as he tried to replicate himself with a franchisee, which we call an operator, that operator is the key to success in our system. And so we don't manage them, we don't have to tell them too much what to do. There are certain brand standards they need to adhere to. We just try to resource them, support them, encourage them, turn them loose. Most of the time we're leveraging the fact that they can do in their local trade area what nobody else can do. We can't do that from our corporate offices in Atlanta, so we lean on them, and that model has been a key part of our success over time. There is a growth mindset for sure. It is sort of baked into the organization because growth is good. Growth creates opportunity. In fact, a lot of our operators, they're so excited about the growth they experience. It's very interesting. What motivates them is growth so that they can share it with that next kind of level of leader coming up. They might have been an employee in a restaurant who became an operator and now is succeeding at a high level, and they're very interested. I help the next, the folks that work for me that are helping me build my business do the same thing. So yeah, growth, you really don't want folks that don't fundamentally bring a growth mindset to the table, but we don't have to hold a target over their head. They want it. A lot of what we're just trying to do is block and tackle and get all the friction out of the way so they can get after it. I'm fortunate to be in a place where we value things beyond just financial return. Mm-hmm. It's important for sure, and we've been really blessed to have really strong financial return, but I know that there's a lot more to it, that it's not just lip service. I have been the beneficiary of people that have just poured into my life, leaders, mentors, and when you've experienced that, you fundamentally have a desire, hopefully, to share and do the same for others. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where I'm at this point. And it has sort of become a focus across the business. It's operators in our restaurants who are caring and pouring into their teams, but it's also how can they do that for the guests they serve in their community? How can they just sort of be a point of light in their community? Mm-hmm. So that is a big part of our culture. It also means I have a responsibility to take care of myself. So I'm not trying to serve out of an empty wagon. Mm-hmm. I got to make sure that I'm well stocked. It's a combination of things. I mean, we've been talking a lot about it over the last couple of years. How do you make sure that you're healthy physically, emotionally, spiritually, and that you have to build in disciplines. We stress the importance of taking time away from the business. Part of it is just to spend time on other priorities like family for sure, but also just to get away and have a very different experience so that when you come back you're fresh and again you're bringing your best. I have a real passion for making strategic trade-offs and working hard to keep our experience and therefore the business relevant. At the same time, we're trying to preserve, I think, a very unique culture that we've been able to create over time. We think that's kind of a force multiplier for what we do. But when I think about relevance, we've learned a lot about innovation over time. I'd say for a long, long time, we had a pretty static business model. We had a lot of opportunity to grow it geographically. And so it was basically just stamping out pretty much the same thing as we followed, the Walmarts and Targets and Home Depots and Lowe's of the world across the country. Still markets we're very underpenetrated in, so there's opportunity there. But we could also sense that we need to do more than just continuous improvement. We need a really diverse portfolio of innovation projects that would span from some continuous improvement work, but also just some radical innovation and transformation work. And so we've sort of cultivated that capability, tried to recruit talent to it, and now we run a lot of projects that I think are helping us. So what I get really passionate about is I want to make sure that Chick-fil-A is as relevant, arguably more, going forward in the midst of a pretty dynamic marketplace. What I often tell my team is we are working in the midst of a very dynamic marketplace, and you see brands sort of come and go. And if we want to stand the test of time, we're not going to be able to lock it down and just stay the same. I'll challenge them personally. I'll say, so if you show up next week and you're pretty much the same version of you next week that you were this week, everything else has sort of shifted a little bit. You probably fell a little bit behind. If you keep that up, you're going to really fall behind, and it's going to be more challenging for you to add value, and that typically doesn't end well. And that's true for us individually, but it's true for us as a brand. So how are we constantly challenging the status quo and evolving? And so I would say it's probably been 15 years, but we did a deep dive study on innovation. I think Silicon Valley is arguably sort of the epicenter of innovation. So we went out there and spent time with the tech firms, the Facebooks and Googles and so forth of the world. Went to film studios like Pixar. Went to CPG businesses, Procter and Gamble. Just all kinds of business trying to understand how do you think about innovation, and said we've got to learn how to think about it. So we have to build a culture around it. We've got to build space where you can practice it. Have to have a process people can follow, and then you've got to attract talent to it. We had been investing in things like digital mobile app, enhanced drive-through service, delivery, and we've been doing that just operating under the assumption that if we don't evolve, we'll lose it. This is kind of what we learned out at Stanford in Silicon Valley, this concept of design thinking. It's taught there. IDEO is probably the world's largest design firm based right there in Palo Alto. We just created our own version of it, but we talk about the need to first understand, which means before you just start doing, really lean in. It's a lot of ethnographic research trying to understand what does your customer need and what's going to serve them best. That drives a lot of the ideation work. And then a really important step before you rush to market, do a lot of prototyping. Prototypes are just crude, minimally viable products. You want to gather feedback. You don't want to put too much into it. You don't want to make it precious. And then you can modify it based on what you learn. Then go test that. We do a lot of testing. We have hundreds of projects in test at any given point in time. And then you're going to do some culling, and you only have a finite amount of resources, so you want to put those resources where you think you're going to get the best return. And so that's what we do. That's what we ultimately roll out. So a lot of understand. We say imagine. We prototype. We validate or test, and then we launch.